and you've been through much worse than this.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Hell
And it's
yeah.
that knowledge. And I mean, I find that comforting, it doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. It just means that, because there is no happily ever after, as we know, you don't sort of achieve some level of happiness and then that's sustained for the rest of your life. It's more
Correct.
of a roller coaster. But in those down times, I know that I can get through it. And that's very comforting.
Yeah. Welcome to the Permission to Heal podcast. I am Marci Brockman. Together, we will discover what brings us meaning and true joy. You only need your own permission to begin. Hello, and welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marci Brockman, and I am thrilled that you are here. I am thrilled that you keep coming back week after week. And hopeful that in your return each week, in your listening to and enjoying each of the episodes, that you are buoyed and inspired and given a little push to dig deep within yourself and find your true purpose and meaning and beauty and joy and love and connection and belonging and resilience, and that you realize how incredibly unique and beautiful you are. Anyway, before I get too sappy, I interviewed or had a conversation with Deborah Covell Fletcher today. She is from Toronto, and she has just written a book called Finding Your Hay, a crash course in braving grief and embracing joy, that is available where you buy books online. The link to that will be in the show notes. Deborah is an adult educator, a speaker, a mom of twin daughters who are in their early 20s. She works as a realtor, which helps her to support her obsession with snooping through other people's homes. I love that. As a busy mom and advocate for her daughter who lives with multiple disabilities, Deb has found the time to jot down stories, lessons learned, and inadvertent observations, most of which have found their way into her book, Finding Your Hay. And she tells us the story of where the title of that comes from. It's something that her dad said to her. Very movie moment type of story. And in Deb's free time, she gardens, dances like everyone's watching, and chases the ice cream truck down the street. And the cover of her book is a cartoon picture of her swinging from a chandelier. So she might do a little of that on the side. I hope you enjoy this conversation as we talk about the many different ways that we can each experience grief in our lives, or the disappointment of something expected that didn't happen the way we planned. And that happens to us all the time. And what can we learn from that? And how can we learn to make our own lives better and easier and more enlightened, and also that of our children and our friends and family and so on. So it's really an important conversation for all of us, I think. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks. Bye. Hi, I'm so excited to share with you the new Permission to Heal Bookshop on bookshop.org. We all know how important it is to support our local and independent bookshops, and I've created a podcast dedicated bookshop on bookshop.org. So just follow along with me at Permission to Heal Bookshop on bookshop.org. The link will be attached to the post, and you can have access to the entire catalog of books by my expert guests. You can just click and order from the independent bookshops and support everyone. It's pretty awesome. I've also put a bookshelf with my own Permission to Land books on it, and all sorts of books for inspirational help and books that I love. So join me on bookshop.org with the bookshop, the Permission to Heal Bookshop. So let's just start.
Okay,
Hi,
let's do it.
Deborah. How are you today? I'm so excited that
I'm
you're here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
That's wonderful. It's a lovely summer day. So let's just jump in here. You've got this new book that you just published a few months ago called Finding Your Hay, a crash course in braving grief and embracing joy. I think that's something we could all use.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
think you just mean grief as in death. I think you mean grief as in any perception or hope that has not lived up to our expectations, if I'm correct.
That is it exactly. Like not just about loss, but about unmet expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how did you I know you've got an interesting story that brought you to this concept and to this change in your career or change in your focus or at least an exploration in your um, multidimensionality as a human. So,
Right.
why don't you share with us and get us caught up?
Yeah. So I have always been a storyteller. And I think a lot of us are. You know,
Yeah,
how something funny happens and you think, oh, I have to tell my partner. Oh, I have to tell my girlfriend. She'll really enjoy this story.
exactly.
Right. So, as we all are, I'm a collector of my own stories. And I actually learned, I was about, I'm going to say late teens, early 20s, that if I had something happen that was, excruciatingly embarrassing or that was just downright terrible, if I turned it into a funny story and was able to laugh at it with
Right.
friends, family, then it just took its power away, right?
Absolutely. I have many of those
So,
stories that I share with my high school. I'm a high school English teacher that I share with my students every year, and they think they're hysterical. But in the moment, I was like, oh my God. And now, so many years hence, they're just anecdotes that everybody
that's
can enjoy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of it, right? So my girls are going to be 23 next month. And when they were born, they, so I had their identical twins, and one was born with severe physical disabilities. She also has some developmental delays. So they were perfect as far as I knew, but something happened during the birth. So my daughter has cerebral palsy, which
Okay.
impacts her gross motor, fine motor skills, in that she has none. So she's in a
Oh, well, that's an
wheelchair.
impact.
Yeah, so she uses a wheelchair. She has no fine motor skills, so she requires pretty much total care. And what that means is, so she's unable to speak, she's unable to eat, so she eats through a tube in her stomach and she eats a liquid formula. So that means that we do everything for her.
Yeah.
She's also incontinent. I mean, she's severely disabled. She's also a very funny, happy young woman. Um, but as you can imagine, when we received the diagnosis, it was pretty
Shocking.
devastating,
Yeah.
right? So it was absolutely shocking. And that's what happens when something like that happens, is you go into this kind of shock. And I'm sure it lasted for about a year with me. It was just, we were just sort of trying to get through.
I mean,
And it wasn't,
infanthood is difficult enough.
it is, and it's
Twin
difficult enough
infanthood
with
is
twins.
crazy. Right.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost like I didn't know any better. I just, every time that I changed a diaper, I changed two. So it was like, that was just my norm.
Right.
But there were additional challenges with her for sure, and a lot of medical appointments and so on, and just dealing with just this sadness
Yeah.
and, a sense of loss. And so, I was dealing with grief for her. Now, at this point, at age 23, I mean, she is just such a happy person. It's not like I feel grief, um, sort of on an ongoing way. But there's also
Right.
that grief I felt I for her sister,
Mm-hmm.
who has had a challenging life because of her sister, unfortunately. and has again risen above it. But back then, I mean,
Well,
I
it's
didn't
just
know
her
how it all turned
reality.
out.
She wasn't born into an alternative that she could compare it to. You know,
Yes,
this was just who her family is and was. So it
right.
becomes a
Yeah,
part of the fabric of your life.
yeah. And you don't know how it's going to turn out. You don't know how it's. So it's. I think that along with those, as you pointed out, those unmet expectations around grief, there's also that fear where you don't know how you're going to get through it. You don't know what the end result will be. And so that leaves you in this state of feeling not too much in control of
Sure.
the situation or your own emotions, right? So as I developed, call them tactics or strategies to deal with what was going on at the time, and as I came through it, I started to reflect on how I was getting through it and sort of think about, okay, how am I responding? How would I have responded 2 years ago versus how I'm responding now? And just sort of,
Right.
sort of taking note and
Like
then
a
started
meta
literally.
awareness of your own enlightenment or your own experience and how that's
Right.
grown.
Yeah. And so as you know, that takes effort, it takes
Sure.
intention. And the more aware I became of that, at the same time, it just, the time of life, things happen to all of us. There's
Of course.
losses, there's things that happen. And so for the book, I interviewed four close friends of mine who had been through their own grief stories or journeys for completely different reasons. And so what I did with my story, so my part of the book is really more of a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
It's about my reflections on grief, and then I interviewed these four friends, and then was able to weave their stories together almost, and pull from each of their stories themes or similar ways that they may have tackled what they were going through. Life lessons and strategies that they had learned. So it all came together really nicely. And above all, my initial inspiration was my dad. And he had, at age 46, he had had a heart attack and then a stroke
Yikes.
and was unable to work in his profession again. He just, I mean, his life as he knew it was over.
Right.
And that's pretty young to
Yeah,
have something like that happen.
absolutely.
Right. And so I would have been 21 going on 22. And for me, that was a big experience of grief for me, just watching what he went through. And it was,
Yeah.
a scary time. And then watching him as he dealt with the fact that he knew he would never be the same. And he recovered. He regained his speech. He had lost his speech for 2 years. He was in speech therapy. So he had completely lost his speech. He lost a lot of his memory. Physically, he was okay. And I don't know if you know too much about strokes, but they can impact the brain in all different kinds of ways. And
Sure.
sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's more mental processing, sometimes it's a combination of both. But for him, it was really around the mental processing. So watching him as he, first of all, recovered from the heart attack and the stroke and the physical implications, but then how he embraced the rest of his life. He lived to be 82, and just how he got up every day and, sort of lived his life with positivity
Well, it's
and
almost half
and
of his life was post
appreciation.
stroke.
Yep, yep. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but he really became sort of the poster child for me. I,
Sure.
I was able to look at him and see how he had dealt with it and see how much joy and happiness he still had in his life, despite, the trials that he had gone through.
Sure.
So
So it was sort of
he,
training you in your own resilience
right,
before your daughter was born and then provided an ongoing example of what could be.
exactly. Yeah. And when I realized that, it was just really profound for me. And so the memory that came to me was, so he had the heart attack And then a week later, he had this stroke. So he was still in the hospital from his heart attack when he had his stroke. And the first time that I went to the hospital to visit him, it was in the morning, I remember, and I don't know how he knew I was walking down the hall toward his room. Maybe one of the nurses told him, I don't know. So I'm walking down the hall, and it's the first time I've seen him.
Mm.
And he, as I was approaching, he suddenly leapt out of his hospital room into the middle of the hall and just
Wow.
went like this, hey, like that. And
Wow.
so I ran into his arms, and
It's
I'm
like a
not
movie moment.
exaggerating. It was like a movie moment. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the hey was pretty much the only word I understood from our whole visit. Like he had lost his speech.
Right.
But so when I look back on it, I mean, in the moment, it comforted me. He was obviously saying, don't you worry. I mean, I was young, and he was, sort of saying, don't worry, I'm going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. But I also think that it was for him too. I mean, this was kind of like how he had decided to live his life.
Right.
And so that's where the title of the book
I
comes
was going to
from.
ask you that, finding your hay. Now
Yes.
I can see it. I can visualize the whole thing. Right.
Yeah. So I've got my book. So it's Finding Your Hay. And that's me swinging on a chandelier. Um,
Do you do that in your free time?
I try. I try.
Yes.
So that was, so that's how it sort of all came together. And so I was writing the book. Um, right when I got to the end of the book, he actually passed away. It was finally,
Oh,
his heart finally gave out. I mean, having a heart attack that young,
sure.
there's so I mean, he lived a wonderful long life, I guess, relatively speaking. But and so we were devastated,
Yeah.
so there's not to spoil the ending for anyone, but so there was that experience. And again, that recognition that I can carry this grief
Hmm.
because I now know how to do it, and so it was really interesting how it all came together.
So how do you do it? You just said you can carry the grief because you know how. So
Yeah.
how? Show us how.
Yeah. So there's a few things that one story that I like to share, and I shared this story long before it was ever a book was an idea in my mind even. So when my girls were very young, if I happened to see a set of healthy twin girls, it was just absolutely devastating for me.
I'm sure.
And I've since recovered from that. But when they were young, I live in a pretty sort of busy residential area where we have a main street and lots of shops, and that's where you go to take a walk.
Hmm.
Very family oriented. So I would be walking down the street, pushing my double stroller, and if I saw a double stroller coming my way, I would always have to look, right? So if there
It's human
were,
nature.
yeah, most of the time it was siblings, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. But if it happened to be a set of twins, I would position this imaginary knife, you know, right in front of
Oh,
my heart.
Deborah.
And if it was a set of girls, I'd push that knife in. If it was a set of identical twin perfect girls, I would just stick that knife right in, right?
Right.
And it was just excruciatingly painful. So, but we do this to ourselves, right? You have a sore tooth, you poke it with your tongue. This is what we
Right.
do. So one day
You have to
they were
choose not
about,
to stab yourself with the knife.
that's right. So they were about 3, and I had never consciously considered that though. So they're about 3. I'm walking down the street, and I see, and I'm pushing them, and I see a double stroller heading my way. And this voice in my head literally said, just don't look.
Right.
And, it was my voice, obviously. Um, I didn't have to sort of look around, So
Right.
what was that? So the stroller passed me and I didn't look in the stroller. I had no idea if it was twins, if it was siblings, if it was just two little kids,
Could be
and it
cats.
didn't
You don't know.
matter.
Right.
Yeah. And it didn't matter. And I remember walking past and smiling and then laughing out loud and realizing that I had this power to do just this. And it's not, it sort of sounds like denial, but
It's not
it's more about,
denial.
yeah, it's more about choice,
Right.
right? And that's so that was a huge revelation for me that I can choose what to focus on.
Yeah. I mean, denial would have been not looking in your own stroller,
Right.
but you weren't doing that. You were just
Right.
choosing what was important to acknowledge and what wasn't. And what was
Right.
in the other stroller has no effect on you.
Right.
It doesn't
And
matter.
so I, I kind of talked to my dad a little bit about that. But I think that that's exactly how he led his life as well. Just
Hmm.
you choose what you focus on. And so that was a liberating realization for me. And I even passed it on to my daughter Emma because I mean, she just, as you say, she didn't know any different when, I mean, her sister was completely normal to her. This is what a sister is, right? But when they turned, I don't know, like maybe 8 or 9, she realized at that time, oh, my sister's different
Hmm.
than other people's sisters. And so being very protective of her, if we were somewhere and she saw somebody else, man, woman, or child, staring at her sister, she would give them the dirtiest look.
Good
Like,
for her.
I'm not kidding. It was, if looks could kill, honestly. And so, I mean, I thought it was kind of funny at first. And then I thought, this isn't going to serve her well. It's not a good feeling to feel that kind of venom for someone
Right.
else. And, most of the time, her targets were pretty innocent,
Hmm.
right? And so I talked to her about this and I said, you've got a choice because when you walk into a room, you look around and you're looking to see if someone is staring at your sister. And I said, you've got that choice. You've got a choice of whether to do that or not. And so, I think she sort of resisted at first, but then she just started letting it go as well and recognizing. So, it's this, and I mean, I'm sure you teach these kinds of life skills to your students. It's sort of this basic skill that, when I was going to school, we were not taught any kind of, emotional intelligence, how to
Sure.
manage or regulate your emotions, or the fact that your thoughts control your emotions or can certainly inspire you or do the opposite, cause you to think negatively. So and to feel
Well,
negatively.
our awareness
Yeah.
inspires our thoughts, which control how we perceive our emotions.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you don't allow yourself to be aware of what's in the other stroller, you kind of short circuit the whole thing.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So that's I mean that's one example. Um, and and so it's not that I'm trying to avoid feeling sad or feeling grief. It's just that I'm going to choose those moments and I'm going to choose when I feel sad or feel a loss.
Hmm.
And then when I'm going to look elsewhere and feel good and feel, happy and whole. And we all have that ability, assuming that, our chemical makeup is and our mental health is in good working order. We have that ability to feel happiness and joy in the moment.
Right. And it's important to recognize that it's there for us anytime we choose to look for it.
Right.
It's always there.
Yeah. Yeah. So in writing my book, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of preachy or saying you have to do this. It's more about storytelling and saying, hey, this worked for me. You might want to try this. And as I said, looking at the friends in my life and their stories and what, I learned a lot from them as well as my dad. So sort of bringing all of our tactics together and so it's more of a, hey, try this, might work for you, and and really just understanding that we're all in this together. There's pretty much no one that is exempt from feeling any kind of loss or grief, or even from those, as you mentioned, those just unmet expectations,
Sure.
so you lose your job, you get a divorce, all of it all counts. It's all grief
Yeah.
that you have to go through for however long,
And
that period
avoiding it
lasts.
isn't going to make it any better.
No.
Avoiding dealing with those things. I have the saying, the only way out is through, tattooed on my arm, so that I don't ever
Awesome.
forget. Because you can avoid, you can
Yeah.
mask, you can numb, you can do whatever to avoid feeling those feelings because they're unpleasant, and who the hell wants to feel them? But it's
Right.
necessary to address them. It's necessary to process through them, to figure out what we can learn from them. I mean, I am a firm believer that every experience that we have, good, bad, or otherwise, is a learning experience. What
Yes.
can we get out of it? And ignoring it isn't gonna help.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And you can develop this resilience, you know you can, I liken it to the fact that Quinn is, she's visually impaired as well on top of everything else. So it's just like, oh, okay. um and she can see, but it's this kind of impairment where it's like she's seeing through Swiss cheese, I've been told. So it's kind of like,
Okay. There are
sort of
holes.
in and out, holes, blurry. um and glasses don't correct it. So to me, it's because of that. But she has an amazing sense of hearing. It's like it's almost hyper developed.
Well, they
And
say that about people who have some sensory impairment that the other senses kind of make up
right,
for.
right.
They become more
Yeah. So
sensitive.
yeah, so it's kind of like that with grief. You can kind of build up these other muscles to carry it,
Mm-hmm.
so you can build up these strategies and tactics to use in order to be able to carry this grief, because it doesn't go away.
No.
And it's not that, I'm never going to cry again, or be sad for my daughter in difficult circumstances. I mean, she's, she's happy, she's healthy. She has to undergo a lot of surgeries, medical procedures now all the time. So, if she's experiencing something that's particularly physically painful, or she has to have a, surgery, I mean, I'm still going to be upset. I'm still going to
Of
feel that
course.
same grief. It's just that it's um it's nice to know that it's manageable. It's nice to know that
It doesn't
it
have
is
to
a
take over
moment
your
in
whole
time.
life.
Yeah, yeah. And that moment in time is going to teach me something. It's going to lead to something else. And it's like looking back and thinking about happy memories with someone who's passed away. You can either be happy about those moments. You can be sad that they're gone or that they're over, but it's about appreciating that those moments happen as well.
Exactly.
It's sort of like it's not all or nothing. It's we're all a mix of all of these different
Exactly.
emotions and experiences.
Exactly. My about almost, well, 9 years ago, this October will be 9 years ago, my mom died of a very long opiate addiction. It's basically what killed her. And she was, just ripped the headphone right out of my ear. She was undiagnosed, self-medicated bipolar for a very long, for most of her life. And one of the ways that she masked or deadened the pain was through a variety of opiate based medications that she just abused. Anyway, after she died, I was extremely grief stricken and extremely angry. I had cut off contact with her a full 18 months before she died because the addiction turned her into someone else. My
Right,
my mother, the woman I knew as my mother, no longer existed. What existed was the belligerent, angry addict.
right.
And I couldn't, I didn't know what to do with that during the 18 months in
Oh, that's so
that
hard.
happened afterwards. But then anyway, so then she died, and um my nephew called, and he's the one who found her and told me or whatever, and I didn't sort of know how to feel. Like I was relieved that it was over, sort of sad, obviously, that it had to happen that way, and I kind of didn't know how to process the grief, the little girl in me that wanted it to be
Yeah,
different, the
that's
daughter that
still
just lost her mother. Like how do I deal with that? And then nobody else would eulogize her. And I thought her husband, her second husband, would, or her sister, or her best friend, or like nobody wanted to say anything. So I'm like, I can't, no matter how angry I felt at her, I couldn't let her go without saying something.
right.
But I also couldn't stand up in front of the room and say she was a belligerent drug addict and she tortured us. And I couldn't say that. So I didn't know what to do. So I happened to coincidentally be the keeper of the family photographic archives. And so I sat down with a very large glass of bourbon and photo albums dating back to the 30s, and I looked at photographs of my grandparents when they were first married, and my mom when she was born, and her whole life, and I started to see her again as a cherished baby, as an
Right.
innocent, cherished, delightful, happy person who proceeded to make a bunch of choices in their lives, like we all do, some of them good, some of them bad. But I saw
Right.
her whole life chronicled in photographs, eventually getting married and having me and the cousins and the weddings and, you know, uh, my younger cousins and all the stuff and the holidays. And it reminded me of the joy and the love and the generosity and all of the other things that the negative effects of her addiction kind of temporarily annihilated.
Right.
And so I was
Oh my
able to give
gosh.
her a eulogy that was loving and respectful and not angry. And so that was that moment in time. But
Oh
then
my gosh, that's amazing.
you're left with the rest of your life. Like, how
Yeah.
do I put all of that in in a way that makes sense and allows for my own growth? Like, how do I get past this and all
Right.
of the things that I was taught about myself that weren't true but were a backlash from her mental illness, you
Right.
know?
It's
So
like you have to learn to parent yourself
absolutely, absolutely.
through it.
And
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I had to do and continue to do. I have been a journal writer since 1983. I was an only child living in my
Oh my
parents'
gosh.
dysfunctional marriage, and my mom's dealing with my mom's addiction and my mom's mental illness and my dad leaving, and I didn't know what to do. Like so I just started writing. And between writing and art, I healed myself. That's what
Yes.
worked for me. It allowed me to process all of my experiences and all of my emotions and get it out of my brain onto paper so that I wasn't carrying it around all the time. And
Right.
between that and reading everything and talking to people like you who have experienced things and therapists, and I found my way out.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I was a journaler. I was not. One of my friends that I interviewed for the book, she she journals, and all of her pain went onto the pages, and it helps you to process it,
Yes.
and it's something you can look back on and look and say, oh, look how far I've come
Yeah.
as well, right?
And I used my journals to write my memoir, Permission to Land, and
Right.
which was about my whole experience with my mom's bipolarity and addiction and how I figured all of the intergenerational toxicity out and
Yeah.
pretty much halted most of it. I'm sure I screwed my kids up in other ways that I don't know yet, but at least
Oh, we all do.
we all do. But the things that my great grandmother passed down to my grandmother, who passed it down to my mom, and she passed it down to me, I was able to get rid of most of those. I
Right.
think. I think. My kids might
Yeah.
tell you otherwise, but I think I was able to get rid of most of those and make myself happier and find awareness of meaning in my life and so on, and resilience and my ability to like reinvent myself multiple times, which I think we all do to a degree, some more than
We
others.
some more than others. There are people that still don't develop that self-awareness, and
Right.
they just don't do it.
They don't.
And they could use conversations with people like you and I that have been able to. I mean, not that that sounded really arrogant and
No,
self
but that's the purpose of the
promoting.
podcast.
Yeah,
I
and
want
it's
to
just
give
that,
people
hey, look at.
permission to give themselves the opportunity to heal and
Yeah.
become self aware and grow from whoever they were yesterday,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
use the tools that we talk about or not.
Yeah,
We're
and all
offering
the
them.
mistakes that we made, and
Right.
and I mean, it's I mean, I have been bumbling my way through life, like we all do. We're just not, we're not born with a lot of
No, it
these
does not come with an
skills,
instruction manual.
right? Yeah, I always say that about my daughter Quinn. I wish she came with a manual. It's just,
Right.
and you're left to figure it out, right?
Yeah. We teach each
Yeah,
other, learn from our mistakes, hopefully, and try to
right,
make a better choice the next time.
right.
It's kind of it.
That is it.
That's it. You screw up, you try to do it again another time, you try to do it a better way, and
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's craziness. Parenthood, whether your kids are born able-bodied or not, you
Yes.
know, there it's a minefield. You don't know what your choices are, or you know,
No.
you know,
No. And it's just watching them and seeing. I mean, I remember at first I would point out things like, oh, they got that from me, or oh, she gets that trait from you, with her dad,
right,
and then eventually it's like, no, I mean, we account for some of who they are for sure, but no, the rest of it comes from them. It's
sure,
just who they are, right?
yeah.
And it's just so interesting when they grow and they have other traits and abilities that I was I was not born with, so yeah, it's
And
very
allowing them
interesting.
to live with those, to express
Yeah.
those, to have
Yeah.
the freedom to then make their own choices and potentially their own mistakes and learning from them.
Yes.
Being conscious as a parent of your own prejudices or your own views or your own values, or how, when they're really little, we have to make decisions for them. But as they grow
Right.
older, hopefully what we've done as parents is prepare them for our own obsolescence in a way, like they
Yes.
beginning to make their own choices and their own decisions and learn from them, and without limitations that we have imposed on them or
Yeah.
inadvertently imposed on them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, and it's hard, it's hard to let them make their own mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because Emma went away to she went away to university, um and then she did come back, and she's doing her master's here in Toronto at the University of Toronto. So she's living at home
Right.
again, just for temporarily, and then she'll be gone. But so she had lived, I mean, like your daughter, she'd gone away to school for 4 years, and like your son has as well.
Yeah.
And so she was 22. And after dinner, before she was going to bed, I said, "Did you brush your teeth?" And she just she looked at me like, "Mom,
Leave me the hell alone. Right. Are you kidding?
like, I can't believe." But it was just so natural that
Sure.
that I
Well, like my daughter, she came home. She graduated from college. She came home for about 6 weeks before she takes possession of her new apartment in mid July, and so she came home and she did go away to college during COVID. So for a
yeah,
good 3 semesters, she was home going to school remotely because they
yeah,
weren't allowed to be on campus, or it was just easier and to avoid COVID completely. So it's not like she hasn't been home for 4 years, because she has. But
right,
suddenly she was like, I'm going to go out with my friends. Is it okay? I'm like, you don't have to ask permission. You're 22 years old, or she's 21. You're 21 years old. You're a college graduate. Just let me know approximately what time you'll be home so I know when to worry. Otherwise,
right,
go do you. But,
right.
but so
So funny.
it's just funny. So just a very superficial way of looking at this. Last night we were looking for couches and furniture and decorations for the living room in her new apartment, and she thought she wanted a yellow couch, and so she found in the internet this lovely, very beautiful yellow linen couch, and I thought, no, it's going to get destroyed. And before I let
What
her
color's her cat?
brown, dark brown. There's going to be
Right.
dark brown fur all over.
Yep.
21-year-olds, they're going to have parties. Things are going to get spilled. I made the mistake like 10 years ago of buying a beige and like taupe striped couch.
Right.
And I thought, it'll be fine. It was destroyed because the just no, you got to get a darker couch. People are going to sit on it, they're going to eat, stuff's going to get spilled, there's going to be cat hair, whatever. So before she could even tell me her thoughts about this yellow couch, and I'm like, hell no, that's yellow linen, do not go there. And she got really mad. She's like, boy, let me speak, let me talk about it, let me say anything before you jump.
Right.
I'm like, all right, you're right, I was
Right.
wrong, that was my perception. You want to buy a yellow couch, it's your money, go ahead, but I think it's a
Yeah.
mistake. I'm like, I'm going to go unload the dishwasher and unload my baggage there, and then I'll come back to the conversation later. And we were fine. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was a simple, superficial way of saying what
No,
we
but
were
it's
just
all those
talking
little
about. But,
things. Yes.
right. So funny. So funny. But I also remember when I was about her age, I got a job like 3 or 4 hours upstate New York. And I was going to move off of Long Island away from my parents. And my mom flipped out. And granted, she had her own mental health issues and her own anxiety that was never addressed. And the thought of
Right.
me moving away and not coming back. College
Right.
was one thing because I was always home for vacations, and it's a 4 year, it's a finite period of time. But me moving away to a different part of the state where I would be many hours away from her, all she could tell me were all the catastrophic things that would happen. Not you'd be successful and you're resilient enough to figure it out, and we're
Right.
always here if you need help, but what are you going to do if, and what are you going to do if that happens, and what are you going to do if this happens, and how is that going to work, and oh my god, you can't do this, you can't do that. And she scared the crap
Right.
out of me, and I let her manipulate me, and I stayed home.
You
And
did.
I did.
Oh,
I was the only child. I had no advocate. I had nobody.
right.
Nobody was there tempering
And that's
her
that pressure you would have
negativity.
felt. Yeah.
Right. And so I just stayed home, and how my life would have changed or how things would have been different. Well, that's
Yeah.
something else. But so now I see both my kids wanting to move out of state. They don't want to come home.
Right.
And it makes me think about my experience that I had with my mother, and I didn't do anything but support them. You know,
Right. Yeah.
I'll help you find an apartment if you need. I'll help you furnish it if you need. You know, if you need me to co-sign something, I will. Just go try
Yeah.
it. You know, you can always come home if this
Right.
doesn't work. You can always change your mind. You can always say, nah, I don't like this roommate. I'm going to live with someone else. Or I don't like this job. I'm going to change and do something else. There are
Right.
always options. But
And you're just providing that support in the
right,
background. Yeah.
exactly. Staying home and moving back into your teenage bedroom isn't going to help your growth. Go
No.
do something. Go. You know, you're
Yeah.
always welcome, but go do you, you know?
Yeah.
And I I guess that's part of my own enlightenment, my own consciousness as a parent, as a human being, to do
Yes.
better than the previous generation did with
Yeah,
me.
because the danger is that we apparently that we repeat, right?
Right.
Behavior. So that awareness that, okay, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Yeah. That takes intention.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
there is a little corner of my heart that's saying, fuck no, don't move.
Oh,
Stay,
sure.
stay home. I'm going to miss you too much. You know,
Yeah.
who am I? There was always that question, like, who am I if I'm not a full-time mom? It's been, you
Yeah.
know, it's been 24 of your years on this planet,
Yes.
probably more than your half of your adult life, or at least half of your adult life. What do you do beyond that? You know,
Yeah.
and you work and I work and we both wrote books and we're here on this podcast. So clearly motherhood isn't the only thing that defines us.
Right.
But being aware of that, its awareness is everything. Affects our perception,
Absolutely.
affects our emotions, affects our thoughts about everything, and ultimately our choices and our behavior. I don't know where I'm
It
going with this.
does.
I don't have a
No,
fundamental
it
point
does.
other than that,
And
but
but yeah, but this is, I mean, it all leads to living a happy, healthy life,
right.
right? And that first step is that self-awareness,
Yeah.
and understanding it's okay if I'm sad that they move away,
Right.
but and I will survive. I will, it's like any other change in your life. We
Right.
resist change, we
Because it's
resist it.
unknown. We don't know what it's going to feel like. We don't know what it's going to look like. But I have a car, and regardless of the cost of gas, I can fill my tank and drive to Boston and see them both.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know,
Yes. And you've been through much worse than this,
hell yeah.
right? And
Hell
it's
yeah.
that knowledge, and I mean, I find that comforting. It doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen. It just means that, because there is no happily ever after, as we know, you don't sort of achieve some level of happiness and then that's sustained for the rest of your life. It's a more
Correct.
of a roller coaster. But in those down times, I know that I can get through it. And that's very comforting.
Yeah. You've been through a
Yeah.
roller coaster enough, and you've
Yeah.
proved your own resilience.
Right.
So I was able to get through that. I'll get through this too. You
That's
know,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
so profound. I wish, you know, one of the questions I always ask, I always end the interviews with 7 quick questions, and one of the questions is, what one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self? And I frequently think that if I could impart some of this sense of resilience and trust in my own ability to that younger Marci, how would that have changed the decisions that I had made? But I don't
Right.
think that just the older me telling the younger me would have imparted the depth of what that means. You have to
Yeah.
go through it. You have to experience the
You
things
do.
that teach it to you. Nobody else could just say, hey, you're more resilient than you think you are. You should trust what you think. Because
Yeah.
without the experience of having lived through it, there isn't much to trust. What do you go on? There's no empirical
Yeah.
evidence.
Yeah. And I think you're right that the wisdom comes through living it and experiencing it. And you can't teach that. Who was
No.
it that who was it that said that gave the advice wear sunscreen? That's pretty much it. It was some convocation speech, Kurt
Something.
Vonnegut or somebody like that.
Right.
And that's pretty much the only advice that I think I would be able to understand, telling my
Right.
21-year-old self. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like everything else that I could tell myself just it it wouldn't be enough. It
It
wouldn't
wouldn't be
be meaningful
impactful. It
enough.
wouldn't, right. It wouldn't attach itself to any experience or any, because there wouldn't have been an experience to attach to. Yeah.
Right.
But the sunscreen thing, I think we inherently get. I could have avoided that sunburn I had when I was 22. Oh my god.
Right? So that's
Right.
yeah, those kinds of things. But other than that, you just have to live it and go through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
know, and impart some of your values and your wisdom to your kids, but in a way that doesn't attach connection or ownership to it. You know, like
Yeah.
I can give you what I think and then I have to let it go. You know,
Yes.
like that was one thing that another thing that my mom never learned, that if whether or not I asked her for advice, she would give me her advice or what she thought, I should do in a certain situation. And if I didn't do her thing, if I didn't heed her cautionary advice, she'd get angry at me. She was very
Right.
attached to that. And
Right.
it caused a lot of fights when I said, okay, that's what you think. This is what I think. I'm going to do this. Thank you,
Right.
but I'm going to do this. She didn't know how to let go of that.
Yes.
Um, and I've really tried to work on that with my own kids and my own students. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I think you should do. This is what I would do in your shoes, but it's your life. Only you really know what it feels like to be in your skin. So this is what I would do, but you do you. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all you can do. And
And then let it go.
and then let it go. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean something specific like, when I talked to Emma about saying just don't look, and
Mm-hmm.
having that choice. I mean, she did resist it at first. And then, I don't even remember how long it was, but she eventually, I think, because she had to try it on her own too. She had
Right. And there's
to
probably a lot of
try it.
psychological underpinnings with that, because not
Yeah.
only is she in those instances feeling like she's protecting her sister, she's also
Hmm.
protecting herself. And then
Oh
if she
yeah.
stops doing that, does it mean that she loves her sister less? Does it mean she's less protective? Will it appear to others that she cares less or that she isn't protective? Like there's a whole lot of um, uh, perception of how others perceive us and how we'll perceive ourselves through the action or the inaction that
Yeah.
has to be unwoven or
Yeah.
unknotted in order to make that behavior clear.
Yes. And that's a really good point. And she grew into someone who was very self-conscious. And so, as you know, you can't just say, well, don't be so self-conscious because that's not how you learn to get over
No,
that. So she
right.
had to get over that herself and recognize, what was important um but she had to live that herself. I
Of
I
course.
couldn't I couldn't tell her that part of it. Yeah.
No. I mean, you could say it, but she has to experience it. Most people don't register anything beyond their own fingertips.
Yes.
And everyone's consumed with their own thing. If everyone is the 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 star of their own movie and everyone else beyond them is a supporting player in their movie, then you're not going to pay that much attention. You know,
No, not
I
at all.
I learned that lesson in my first day of my freshman year of high school. I had a zit on my nose, the tip of my nose. This thing was so red, I was like Rudolph. It had its own gravity. It was so big. And no one noticed. All of my
Right.
friends, everyone else was so consumed with their own first day of high school that nobody even noticed or remembered that I had this planet on my nose. And
Right.
and I reflected back on that like a few weeks later, and I was like, gee, it really doesn't matter, does it? No one cares.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. But nobody could have told you that in the moment, back
No,
to that. Yeah.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. Crazy. Oh, Deborah. All right, so let's do the 7 quick questions, shall
Okay.
we? Okay, what 6 words would you use to describe yourself?
Oh my gosh. What's 6 words?
They're not going to be tattooed on your forehead, don't worry.
Well, that's a relief. I do have 2 words tattooed here.
Nice work.
Yeah. So when I was born, I was the firstborn, and my dad was 25 years old. He brought my mom a bouquet of flowers, the next day, because the dads weren't around back then.
Sure.
And on the bouquet of flowers was a little, one of those, just those little wee tiny cards.
Uh-huh.
And it said, "Nice work, love, Dawn."
Nice.
And my mom kept it. She kept it for ever.
Is that your dad's handwriting?
That's my dad's handwriting.
That's awesome.
So, it's kind of, it's sort of something that I aspire to.
Yeah,
Nice work. Her effort, the result of her effort, here it is, right? So,
exactly.
um, and my dad was a very funny person. And you would appreciate this because you are funny. So
Oh,
I would,
thanks.
I would, I would describe myself as funny
Yes.
and as open,
Yes.
right?
Resilient.
And just to, yeah, now resilient now, wouldn't have said that when I was 17, but just resilient and just a big bunch of nice work.
Awesome. Love
There
it.
you go.
What's your favorite way to spend a day?
It's my favorite way to spend a day is it's more on the relaxing side than the active side,
Yeah.
so it's not going to be something really adventurous. It's just going to be a lot of like stopping and smelling the roses kind of stuff.
Excellent. It is for me too. I ask this question and people are like, "Oh, I would love to go hiking or mountain climbing." And I'm like, "Oh God, really? Good. You go do that and leave me back here with a book and a place to put my feet up, and I'm good." Okay. What's your favorite childhood memory?
um it's I actually put this in the book. It's one night. So my sister and I, our best friend lived 2 doors away, and our moms were good friends. And one night they went somewhere for the night to play bridge, and they left us with our fathers. And back then, that was when fathers were babysitting,
Right.
right? They weren't
Mm-hmm.
parenting.
Mm-hmm.
They had never been left alone with their children ever. The moms made the dinner for us that we ate, right? Like they couldn't do
Right.
anything. Um, and then they would have been maybe 35 years old at the time, the dads. We were about, 10, 9, 10. And they proceeded to just party like it was 1999. They just, they had wine with dinner, and then they were drinking scotch, and they were just having a fantastic time. And it happened to be this hot summer night. And so at midnight, we were running through the sprinkler in the backyard in our bathing suits.
That's
And that was
awesome.
something that my mother would never have allowed. We would have been in bed
Yeah.
long before then. But the dads were just letting us run crazy. We could do whatever we wanted. And then we came into the house, and they were playing their music, and it was Simon and Garfunkel's Greatest Hits album. And my dad was standing on the hearth of the fireplace singing Bridge Over Troubled Water at the top of his lungs. And he had a really good voice.
Awesome.
And he was like performing it. And we were just like, oh my God, it was just the most magical night.
That's
It's just
awesome.
Crazy. Yeah.
Did your mom ever find out about what happened? What was her reaction?
Well, they came home, and we spent it was the whole night in the friend's house. And I think my sister and I probably slept there too. And they walked in, and it was just like a bomb had gone off. We had spaghetti for dinner, and it was literally spaghetti was hanging off the dining room table. And like they had not done any cleanup. The house was just an absolute disaster.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
I can't.
Mhm.
I can't. I just can't even. That's
Yeah.
funny. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Our moms.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite meal?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
It was actually, we all got to pick our favorite meal for our birthdays, and mine was my mom's spaghetti sauce. My sister picked Kentucky Fried Chicken, and my brother picked lobster. So
Wow.
I was the cheapest date, I think,
I think so.
probably.
Do you still have the recipe of that for that spaghetti sauce?
Yes.
Oh, good. Excellent. I think we'll skip for the one advice since we already talked about that. What is the one thing you would most like to change about the world?
Oh, um, you know, I was gonna say women's rights.
There you go.
I would say human rights. Um, you shared that your daughter's bisexual, so Emma is queer, and she grew up in Toronto, and it's very accepting here.
Yeah.
We're a very multicultural, pretty urban city. So she, which is good. She probably won't stray too far from an urban center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just human rights, acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. TV shows. What do you watch? What do you binge? What lights you up?
Oh, I just finished Killing Eve, and it like the whole series ended. I'm always so sad when a series
It's
ends.
like your friends move away.
It is. It's so sad. So I mean, I love a show like that that's funny, and I mean, Fleabag was just the best. Fleabag has to be my favorite show of all time.
Really? I've not
Yeah.
watched either of these, so I will check them out.
Okay. Do it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Deb. This was really fun.
Thank
I
you,
enjoyed
Marci.
this. It was really good. I think the listeners will get a whole lot out of our shared experience. Excellent. So your book and your socials and your website will all be attached and linked into the show notes. So if you're not driving your car while you're listening to this, you can scroll down and click away. It'll all be there. If you're driving, you have to make sure you pull over first. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. I am very proud of this Permission to Heal podcast. I want to thank all of you for listening each week, and I'm so glad that it speaks to you. Creating and producing this podcast brings joy to my life, but honestly, I need your help because I find commercials annoying when I listen to podcasts. I don't have commercials on Permission to Heal. I pay for the costs of creating, producing, and marketing this podcast out of my own pocket, and I'm happy to do so, except that times are kind of tough right now, and I could use your help. So through Patreon and a Patreon subscription, you can support the Permission to Heal podcast and help ensure that I'm able to make more episodes and share them with the world. There are several subscription levels that come with different perks and swag. If you're able to, and if you are inclined to, I would really, really appreciate your help. Please go to www.patreon.com/permission to heal. Patreon, patreon.com/permission to heal. And it's linked in the show notes, so scroll down, click away. Thank you so much for your consideration. I hope you and your families are well and happy. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Permission to Heal. I hope you found it moving and inspirational. Please remember, you don't need anyone else's permission to trust and follow your heart. You have the power within you. Subscribe to Permission to Heal so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share this with your friends.